We also looked at SMEs. SMEs constitute almost 90% of our economies. So that sector has also been heavily affected. So the purpose of this webinar is really to dialogue, discuss how best EABC can work with its development partners, with governments in terms of driving the recovery agenda. The EAC and the EABC has come up with the economic recovery agenda with a number of components and instruments that would help and support our economies to recover back, as well as businesses. There are a number of instruments that have been put in place, like trade policy instruments. We've been negotiating with the banks in terms of access to finance. We are looking at the logistics, streamlining the logistics from the port to the final destination. We've been looking at tax simplification of tax regimes across the region. We've been trying to advocate for open airspace liberalization. So there are a number of instruments we've been working on, which are well enshrined under our advocacy plan. But it is important that we all align together in terms of our thoughts, in terms of our ideas, how best do we build back better in terms of looking at the sector that would ignite the recovery of our economy. So the purpose of this webinar is really to get your insights, to get your views, which will inform our economic recovery strategy. So I really look forward for a very fruitful discussion, engagement, questions and answers, and again, be able to provide a kind of framework on how best EABC, EAC, and our development partners we can develop a robust and a strong recovery strategy. So with those few remarks, I really humbly submit my opening remarks, and wish the team, the participants, for a fruitful discussion and engagement. Thank you very much, and have a great deliberation. Over to you, Adrian.
Thank you very much, Executive Director, for enlightenment remarks, which actually will guide our discussion in this webinar. Now we are starting the first session, where I will be moderator. And my name is Adrian Zhao. I'm Trade and Policy Advisor with the EABC Secretariat. Some of our ground rules. First, please mute your microphone when you are not speaking, and also switch off your video when you are not speaking. Also, questions can be sent to our chat room, and raise your hand to contribute or to ask questions. Also put in your mind that we are discussing on a regional perspective, and the meeting will be recorded for reporting purpose. But also we are encouraged to use our social media handles so that we can generate more discussion. So now we are starting our session, and I'm inviting Alhaji Rashid Kiboa, Director of Trade from EAC Secretariat, who is representing Director General, Customs and Trade. And here we are going actually to look the status of developing EAC COVID economic recovery plan. So Mr. Kiboa, can you actually introduce briefly yourself? Karibu, Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Njao, our moderator tonight, and Greetings to colleagues, panelists, and our dear participants, our CEO for EABC. All protocol is observed. I don't know whether you want me to just introduce myself or to explain what the EAC recovery plan is about. What exactly is my assignment at this point? Thank you.
Okay, I think we have a guiding questions, so maybe I will, in order to stimulate discussion, I will ask you some questions, then you will be able to respond with the view of actually informing the participant the status of developing EAC COVID-19 economic recovery plan. And the first question is...
Adrian, excuse me. Hello? Adrian?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm suggesting that you allow Rashid briefly before you go into questions to give a kind of a background of the economic recovery plan so that the participant, before we go into the question, appreciates where we are.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Director, now maybe you give us the status of EAC economic COVID-19 economic recovery plan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, moderator and colleagues. The EAC Economic Recovery Plan is an initiative that has been that was conceived by the EAC Secretariat from the onset of the COVID. As a member partner states convened to review the status of COVID and what was unfolding in the partner states, and seeking to harmonize some key areas of response. It was conceived that maybe the pandemic was just around the corner in terms of ending, and there was therefore a need to run on a twin track where the responses are complemented with a plan for recovery, which is basically supposed to be post-COVID. That was how it was envisaged, and a draft proposal of the plan was put to the members who constituted the response team in the partner states and the Secretariat. We looked at several components that could constitute what would be required to resuscitate the EAC economies after the pandemic. And in the plan, there is it has around 3 objectives. One is to look at what the partner states need to do in terms of responding to the pandemic. That is in terms of the short-run measures as a way of mitigating the spread of the pandemic, but very fundamentally in terms of the medium term of what needs to be done to get the recovery of our economies and partner states after the pandemic is over. So the plan was conceived. It has several components around the key component, 9 component areas for recovery, including one for investment, promotion, investment recovery. Then we have a component on trade and trade facilitation. Then improving transport and transport logistics. Another component of the strategy is in regard to digitalization of the EAC economies and the functionalities like a trade. Then there are also interventions for stimulating key services trade in the EAC. It also highlights interventions for boosting manufacturing and improving the manufacturing regional value chains in the partner states. It also has a component on food and food security and agricultural promotion. The plan also has a strategic area in terms of reinvigorating tourism and the tourism value chains in the region. And lastly, providing capacity enhancement to key institutional players like trade institutions, like investment promotion institutions, like transport, all the key institutions that play a critical role in the COVID response. So the initial draft of this recovery plan was considered by experts and submitted to the Sectoral Council of Ministers for Trade, Investment, Finance, and Industry when it convened in May. And partner states requested for some reconsideration and input and review. So it is now undergoing a series of consultations at partner states level and even at regional level with a view to submitting it to the next round of the Sectoral Council on Trade, Investment, Finance, and Industry. So that is the critical status, the state of play in summary of the plan in terms of the components and in terms of current processes. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Director, for giving us the state of play in terms of developing EAC COVID economic recovery plan. And from that, actually, we have responded some of our questions. But now I think it is high time the participant to understand how COVID-19 has impacted EAC trade and investment, and how EAC partner states have made intervention to mitigate its impact on EAC economies.
Thank you, moderator. One thing I want to highlight is that the impact of COVID on trade and investment has been enormous, and it is still continuing. And we hope it will not spiral into deeper negativity as we will proceed as partner states grapple with the containment of the pandemic and gaining experience. But in terms of trade, I want to say that the impact has been enormous. And I will look at, you will notice, colleagues, that COVID for the EAC was more prevalent in the year 2020. So the figures I may submit relate more to the performance under 2020 and how it compares with the performance in the previous year of 2019. So you will recall, colleagues, that in terms of, for example, exports, the EAC had been able to produce goods worth $14,213 million in 2018. During the financial year 2019, this performance raised to $15,760 million. This was an improvement of about 10% during the year 2019 over the year 2018. Coming to 2020, our exports went up to 16,257. So at the level of exports, there was an increase of 3% for the period of 2020 where COVID was prevalent. And I think it is more of Uganda's export level which contributed to this encouraging performance. In terms of exports, in terms of imports, colleagues, for the year 2019, we had realized an import performance of about $39,517 million. That had improved from 37,000 or 37 billion US dollars. That had represented an increase of 7% over or in the year 2019. Coming to the year 2020, when COVID was very much prevalent, the performance under imports decreased by 10% to a figure of 35,658 million US dollars. So our imports decreased to that extent. In terms of intra-EAC trade, which is by way a measure of how functional our customs union could be. The total intra-trade in EAC for the year 2019 was about 6.3 billion or 6,338 million US dollars, having improved from a performance level of 6,013 million US dollars. So over the year of 2019, the improvement had been 5.5%. Coming to the year 2020, the level of intra-EAC trade went down to 5,987, which represented a decrease of about 5.5%. This implies that the gains that had been made in the year 2019 were completely wiped out in the year 2020 in terms of intra-EAC trade. So, moving away from the trade performance level using those three areas of assessment, I now go to investment performance. Investment performance, for the year 2019, total foreign direct investment was 8,668 millions. having improved from 2,103. You will recall that we had got on a very steep improvement trajectory, because for 2019, the FDI into the region had improved by 375%. It was astronomical. And I think Tanzania was our best performer in that area. However, when it came to 2020, we were only able to realize a foreign direct investment into the region amounting to 4,917 million US dollars. Colleagues, this represents a reduction of about 43% over the performance of 2019. In terms of the jobs that were created or out of FDI, while the EAC had realized a very steep improvement in performance from 89,877,000 jobs to 2,011 over 2019, which represented an increase of 135%. All this dropped in 2020 to only 58,017 jobs. This represented a reduction of 72% in terms of the jobs created out of the foreign direct investment. So the picture, even for foreign direct investment into the EAC, was not very impressive. I will now come to the second part of your question, or in terms of, I think you had asked what the EAC interventions are in terms of mitigating COVID, both at the partner states level and at the regional level. I will say for the regional level, what has been extensively covered in terms of response was in terms of monitoring to mitigate, in terms of mitigation measures by the partner states, to the extent that weekly there has been a meeting of the Secretariat and the regional players, the key regional coordinators for COVID response in the partner states, so that we are able to know what kind of situation is unfolding. So we have been able to gauge and track how the situation has been unfolding. That is at monitoring level. We were also able to harmonize the testing procedures, not so much about the costing, but the procedures, and especially when trucks and the drivers move across our borders, and digitalizing some of these processes. So there was tremendous work done in that area. And thirdly, we were able to convene a meeting of heads of state at the regional level to awaken the national responses and try to move in unison as partner states. And we also have also had joint engagement for the ministries, the ministers for health and trade and finance matters in the region. But if you look at what we have been doing, all this is just in terms of short-term measures that are geared towards mitigation. In terms of the long-term measures which relate to the long-term response, this is covered under the strategic plan, which I talked about in your first part of the question, and I articulated what exists in terms of that plan, but it's still a baby. So Colleagues, that is what has been done in terms of the response. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Director, for the highlight on the impact of the COVID in terms of intra-EAC trade, as well as foreign direct investment in the region, and the response, especially on the regional response. Now, going back to our draft EAC COVID-19 economic recovery plan, we are asking how this plan in medium term going to sustain further growth of trade and investment flow in the EAC, given that evolving nature of COVID-19. Back to you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Njau. And I think since the response is just at the onset, it's very hard to project what the impact of the specific interventions would be when they are implemented. But it's important to know, at least in terms of interventions, what exists for trade and investment under the plan. So for investment, what we hope to do is to increase, to put in place strategies for increasing investment promotion for strategic sectors. Particularly, we hope to target ICT, manufacturing and health, and the other lucrative sectors in our economy. So those ones will be identified further and be targeted specifically. Also, the plan has a component for providing incentives for promotion of regional value chains as the entry points for investment promotion in the region. As in addition, we have the development and provision of investment promotional materials, especially by way of guides to our prospective investors at sector level, so that each sector there is information for provided to potential investors. Additionally, the strategy or the recovery plan captures the need to tap into the diaspora community in terms of providing mechanisms and inroads for them to invest in the region by way of incentives, lobbying them, and trying to maximize their investment potential in the region. And additionally, the plan has a component of building on incubation centers and innovation centers for young projects as a way of boosting investment in the region. And amongst others, issues relating to provision of investment funds and capital are also well captured under the plan. So we hope that these ones, coupled with the deliberate incentives to fund the micro and small and medium enterprises in terms of funding, will go a long way in boosting investment in the region. Of course, other intervention areas like infrastructure and transport logistics, and the other areas which are to be highlighted by my other colleagues. We will work also to improve investment, but I wouldn't like to go into them because they will be highlighted further. Now, for trade, our hope is in a reduction of NTBs, particularly by ensuring that the NTB Act 2017 is implemented, and we also hope to the plan captures the need to specifically target the micro and small enterprise products trade by way of exhibitions, capacity building, and all other interventions specifically for that target, for that sector. Also, for promotion of trade, we want the EAC to move aggressively to tap into the trade preferences that are enshrined under the tripartite and the continental free trade area. We also cover the implementation of the export promotion strategy, which enumerates several interventions for boosting exports, as well as promoting the operationalization of special economic zones and all the interventions under the EAC trade policy. Something very fundamental that needs to come out very distinctly is the promotion of e-commerce and the digitalization of trade, which the plan stresses as a way of running down the cost of doing business and trading in the region. The plan also captures the target of continuing to harmonize the trade standards, enterprise development, the simplification of the guides and material for standards in the region, and a whole range of other trade facilitation measures for cargo clearing, especially in the areas of digitalizing cargo clearance and enhancing collaboration with different partners. And also, amongst others, the plan has strategies for boosting trading in services. So broadly, those are some of the areas that the plan hopes will go some way in terms of improving trade and investment in the region post-COVID. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Director. I think now, can you briefly tell us how the private sector will be involved in this plan and what will be the benefit from the interventions for the private sector? Very brief one.
The private sector, first of all, as you know, the private sector is the primary beneficiary of all the interventions that I've mentioned. All these are private sector interventions, if you listen, by and large. And when it comes to policy harmonizations and taking this plan forward, all the discussions have involved the private sector. And my hope and belief is that we may not specifically need to follow a twin track for promoting private sector involved in each and every activity or intervention separately, but holistically, whenever there is any process, be it policy harmonization, be it something like funding, it is always important that the private sector is involved in all these discussions so that they are part and parcel and they are able to give the private sector perspective so that all these interventions are sensitive and the private sector interests and approaches are well mainstreamed as we undertake all the incentives. But also, you will recall that the EAC is implementing a private sector development strategy, which enumerates various components. And with the new Secretary General of the EAC, he has earmarked the implementation of that strategy. So a simultaneous implementation of the COVID recovery plan, along with the implementation of the private sector development plan, and the involvement of the private sector on table in all the processes relating to regional development and integration, we hope will ensure that the private sector interests are covered and taken care of. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Director, for your positive response to our question. I think some of the question will come also during the discussion. So now we are moving to another panelist, which is Mr. Alex Njombe, Managing Partner, KPMG in Tanzania. I think with the interest of time, let me ask the question, then when you are responding, also you can introduce yourself. From KPMG perspective, how do you describe the recovery phases and pattern of EAC business from the impact of COVID-19?
Thank you, Adrian, and good afternoon, everybody. And I'm thankful for this opportunity to be here in this webinar to discuss various elements to do with COVID-19 impact on the businesses within East Africa. My name is rightly put by the moderator is Alexander Njombe, the Managing Partner of KPMG here within Tanzania. But I also look after a number of business across East Africa as well. Your question is taken, and I think the way we actually approach it and the way we look at it from KPMG perspective within East Africa, we look at the phases from COVID-19 since when it came in and through the recovery process. We categorize that into about 4 phases. And this really spanned from inception when COVID-19 came in. And as rightly said, since when it was announced by WHO in the early days in 2020, we saw a quick reaction coming through across the economies, not only in East Africa, but within the world. And we named that particular initial stage in the process to be a reaction that we were able to see. What we basically saw at that point in time is that we saw professionals and businesses, but people's lives as well, to have been impacted. And I'm seeing the hand is up. I don't know whether needs some intervention. If you can help, moderator. But really, from reaction perspective, we saw professionals and people's lives getting impacted, and it was normal at that point in time with that kind of situation. That reaction was necessary. But then now government had to step in because one of the core objectives is to look after the lives of the people and the businesses as well at the same time. So most of the governments responded in some of the measures to try and protect people and help some of the businesses because of the impact that was seen. But some of the measures which were taken basically to protect people's lives included, and it was different across the East African countries in terms of lockdowns. And I know in Tanzania perspective, Specifically, we did not basically see the extent of the lockdown, but there was a restriction in terms of movement, travel, and other things that were pertinent. But we saw it to have been even more in a number of countries within East Africa. The capital markets were shocked quickly, and you saw some people running and trying to sell some of the investments reactionally. Really because of the panic mode that was basically in the market. Liquidity issues were then imminent, and even some of the banks and financial services sector, they saw some credit risk rising as well at the same time. Businesses triggered what we call BCP plans, and this was the time now that we came to test in terms of the appropriateness of that, and whether the BCPs, the business continuity plans, were robust enough and were really possible to react and be resilient at that point in time. And that now, after that came in, we saw a phase of resilience that everybody saw, where some panic has started to subside, and we saw some controls trying to be lessened. But also now some consumer demand as well. We didn't see that recovering quickly, but slowly at that point in time. Supply chain disruption that we saw in the reactionary phase, that continued to a slightly lesser extent at that point in time. But then there was an issue in terms of some of the capital that was interest-free, struggling to find some takers for that, because now people were not sure of what the future might be, but then it was important for them to contain themselves and to be resilient so that they can then survive the situation at that time. But then now, after that phase, we saw what we call a recovery phase coming through, where capital projects began to actually scale up and fueled. We saw some positive climate coming in, because if you look at the other earlier two phases, that's where you almost most of the countries, if not all, they had a reduction in their GDP growth rates. And a number of countries, probably outside East Africa, even experiencing some negative GDP growth. But most of them, all of the countries experienced a reduction, if you like, at that point in time. And that was informed by some of the measures that were taken to contain the effect of the pandemic to businesses and the economies. And from recovery perspective, we saw that period where, because of the supply chain disruption within East Africa, some countries looking for what we call import substitution opportunities. And you could see some of the things started to be moved and produced locally as well within East African countries, to try and substitute some of the imports that were possible to substitute because of the disruption that we had at that point in time. But then now the fact of the matter is these changes, we quickly realized that they were going to be with us for longer in terms of the COVID-19 virus itself, and that now the businesses had to prepare for some changes that might not be reversed in some of the areas in the future. And that then there was a need to look at what we call a new reality or the new world that might be then around the corner in the future. And now, then it was now critical to plan in terms of businesses on how they wanted to proceed, depending on how they were impacted first. But then how do they strategically see the businesses or the opportunities in the future, which are informed by the new reality. So what it is all about is a new norm that we are looking at. We know because the virus will be there, then the reality was vaccine programs, very critical to try and see whether that can then make a change in terms of prevention in the future, and try to reduce the impact in terms of people getting infected, or the effect of reducing the effect when people are infected. and to try to see whether some normalcy can then be achieved in the future. So that came in at that point in time. Now, with these realities, you find that technology came at the top of the agenda, because we saw that the organizations that were prepared from technology perspective, from BCP side of things, they were better accommodative of the situation. But also now from the interactions with customers and the public, if you like, it was then easy because of the evidence that was seen from difficulties in physical movement, that there was no need or there was no alternative to remote working, for example. In the future, and probably now the interaction in terms of the digitization and e-commerce opportunities for businesses that can interact with their customers that way. We saw a boom in terms of the mobile money, for example, side of the business, and some of these companies had a lot of increase in their revenues, especially from the data side. And we know now, even with the remote working and the BCP requirement, stability of connectivity was then very key in terms of enabling that and having platforms that can support businesses in the future for that, and making an interaction between the businesses and the stakeholders easier. And we saw how the businesses were impacted in different ways, and I think that was discussed. I don't want to repeat, but tourism sector, hospitality, for example, heavily impacted. And then we're seeing some of that impact coming in, seeing some of the recoveries coming, but in terms of the future now, that informs what will be the decisions in terms of the business models for the businesses in that industry in the future. We saw that happening for hospitality, for education sector as well, with the restrictions of students to actually go and attend school, and the need to really modify the modality in terms of how then do you educate your students in the future, and the reality that a virtual element or alternative is probably inevitable. You can talk about it in many sectors. I just want to come back to you at this point in time for the sake of time, Adrian.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Njombe, for that enlightenment, educative in terms of the phases and pattern for business. But in very brief, can you give us given the evolving nature of COVID-19, how should EAC enterprises navigate it to adapt to a world or a new reality?
Yeah. So it's a good question you're raising for businesses, and if you look at the recovery phases that I talked about and the future that is looking into, it's very critical for enterprises within East Africa to be resilient, and somebody might argue that there are different types of resiliencies that you want to look at for the businesses, spanning from financial resilience perspective. And it was necessary for businesses to do some of the simulations that were necessary and to be able to predict the future and really look at different aspects of things in terms of the capital requirements, liquidity, and the like. But also there was a need to look at what we call operational resilience for them. What is it that you want to see from operational side of things, getting things right? From their business models, what are your customers of the future? What are the people that you have to deal with at any point in time? The pattern of recruitment of your people, the talent you want to bring in, and the realization that the population we are dealing with of the millennials, what is it that they want to get to be able to be productive and to be efficient when we employ them. So I think it's really strategizing on these things. And then there was a question of commercial resilience as well. As a business, we find, looking at the data from macro perspective that my colleague panelist presented, where do you then see yourself as a business within East Africa? to be able to realign or align yourself with what is expected in the new reality. So those are kind of the summaries, but my personal advice as well, if I'm to put it in a brief summary, for businesses within East Africa, look at your operating or business model, look at your key stakeholders, who are your clients now and the future, and are you mapped well enough to be able to serve them better, so then you can realize your objectives and the objectives of your key stakeholders, if it is then to maximize the value for them or return for them. But also protect your capital. Capital might erode. We saw that for financial services sector and banks because of the credit risk coming in. Then you had a lot of impairments and provisions coming in which eroded capital. So then you become cautious in terms of who you are lending to and who do you want to interact with. And to be able to then have a package that will help you to restore or to protect your bottom line or your capital as well at the same time. But look for new opportunities, because with every challenge, as human beings, we know that opportunities will be there. So how are we structured to be able to realize those opportunities? We have to look after our people. It's the time when compassion cannot be left alone. We can't leave that to only governments. We also have a part to play to protect them. There are a lot of aspects of this, but one aspect in particular, mental health, because nobody was prepared for this pandemic. So you might think sometimes that your employees are behaving in a strange way. But because of all these aspects that are there, that they really need support from the business leaders. Supply chain disruptions I talked about. Plan ahead, make sure you are spot on and have alternatives. But technology and digitization are the things that we cannot avoid. And the last bit of it is really what is it that we are doing in terms of ESG agenda that is really prominent at the moment, because we have a part to play on that. Thank you, Adrian, and back to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Njombe, for giving us how our EAC enterprises should navigate to adapt a new normal. Now, okay, I'm requesting the participant, if you have any question, please write in our chat room, then we will read during the discussion. Now, I'm inviting Madam Kuzai from Policy Link project in Kenya, who actually will give us the perspective of COVID-19 from agriculture and food security. So I'm going directly to the question, and then when you are responding, then you can give us your brief introduction. The question also says that agriculture being the mainstay of EAC economies, and given that it has been adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, do you think existing EAC partner states intervention can address or improve food security and recovery of the sector? Welcome, Madam.
Thank you so much, Adrian, and a very good afternoon to you all. My name is Kuzai Madzvanika from Policy Link, which is a USAID project working on a project in East Africa called Strengthening Regional Agriculture Competitiveness in a number of East African countries. But I'll just go straight to answer the question because of the sake of time. You can reach me if you want to know more about the activity and the project. Of course, I think amongst the key sectors within the economy, agriculture was the most affected within this COVID-19 pandemic period. And this period actually has amplified the importance and the significance of agriculture within the East Africa community. I'll just highlight that more often we refer to agriculture as the backbone of the economies, its contribution to GDP at about 32%, labor force about 80%, foreign exchange about 65%, about 50% in terms of inputs to industrial sector and to the support to other sector. So it is really an important sector in terms of livelihoods and income across a number of value chains. It's also quite important, you saw from the labor statistics, in terms of rural livelihoods and women employment in incomes for all the EAC countries. It's also quite key in terms of food security and nutrition, particularly in this time where there are a lot of disruptions, both to the supply chain processes, but also even just to the economies and to the incomes of people. And more importantly, it's also quite important in terms of trade and the relationship with the other industries, manufacturing, hospitality, and tourism, amongst others. But coming to the key question of whether the existing EAC interventions and policies and frameworks can actually improve food security and recovery of the sector. First, I would like to acknowledge the input by the director from EAC, Mr. Rashid, who highlighted a number of positive steps that the community has taken to actually address some of these issues and the disruptions that have been brought also by the COVID-19. I would speak more to the agriculture and rural development strategy, which is the main policy in terms of EAC even before the COVID, that was guiding the intervention and the policy frameworks around agriculture sector within the EAC. It has issues to do with addressing food security, improving irrigation schemes, research and uptake of technologies, regional trade, intra-regional trade and inter-regional trade efforts to actually maximize regional trade and also improve regional value chains, issues to do with productive infrastructure in terms of roads, railways, and supporting the infrastructure within the rural areas to actually improve agricultural competitiveness. There are a number of strategic plans, SPS, livestock development, food balance sheet. Even at continental level, we have the CADAM framework at continental level. So you will note from all that I've highlighted, there are a number of existing policy frameworks that can actually address agriculture, food security, and regional trade in agriculture. But what has been the key challenge to actually ensure the effective implementation of the policies and effective outcomes from this policy? A number of the issues have to do with the implementation that I speak about. For instance, at CADAP level, there's a 10% budget allocation requirement for member states. This has not been realized by most, if not all, the EAC countries. The effective monitoring and evaluation of the obligations and the plans that I've highlighted as well at EAC level. There are issues to do with political economy, trade bans, import-export bans, trade barriers, capacity issues that impede the realization of some of these policies, SPS issues. We know of the recent aflatoxin issue. That is just one of the issues, but a number across all the products, across a number of agricultural products. And PolicyLink, we carried out a competitive analysis study that asked a number of key questions. I won't highlight the study, but maybe just one of the key questions that we were looking at is the region competitive in agriculture? And we found out that the region is not very competitive because of three particular issues. The first being the low production levels, low productivity that's affecting production levels. We also have issues to do with trade barriers that is affecting regional trade, effective regional trade within the region. We also have issues to do with the increase in trading costs due to transport and logistic challenges, taxation costs that have also been highlighted in previous discussions, as well issues to do with warehousing, storage facilities, and how do we effectively address these three issues so that we can actually also improve the competitiveness of our agriculture sector and address some of these issues that you have highlighted. Maybe one of the key issues that I can highlight is how do we increase private sector participation and investment in the sector. I know Director has mentioned that EAC is actually working towards private sector development strategy, which is quite commendable. I think going forward, particularly within this COVID environment, it's quite key for private sector, not just to be a party to be probably consulted, but to be seen as a key partner. We can actually also work together to address some of the challenges, particularly within the agriculture sector, where private sector investment is key along a number of issues, from production level, from value chain development strategies, from issues to do with trade, digitization, a number of issues that Director, you also spoke about. So I think even as we go forward in this discussion, it's quite key to see how we can actually upscale that.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Kuzai, for actually giving us some of the area which we needed to address the competitiveness of the agriculture, as well involvement of the private sector in the agriculture sector. Now, another question, because we have talked a little bit on the value chain, we have another question where it's saying there have been disruption of the entire agricultural value chain, leading to the loss of job, especially for youth and women. What are key policy proposal and intervention can address the loss of jobs and support sustainable recovery the sector amid COVID-19?
Thank you so much for that question. I will speak as well to a number of disruptions that have been highlighted, disruptions of supply chains, especially when we look at the agriculture sector. We are looking at issues like inputs, how the COVID-19 has affected the accessibility and cost of inputs in terms of fertilizers, in terms of seeds to the sector. And this will ultimately even affect issues to do with productivity, issues to do with markets, how these physical restrictions are also even affecting the marketing of agriculture products and what is the end result for the farmers, disruption in terms of extension services, disruption in terms of storage, warehousing facilities, a number of disruptions that have come as a result of this. I'll also highlight issues probably that are related to my previous speaker who spoke about business resilience, especially when we are looking at the level of businesses within the agriculture sector, from the production level where we are looking at small-scale farmers to the value chain actors who are largely SME, especially within the EAC region, with increased vulnerability and low resilience levels, and how we can actually address their needs within this environment and even post-COVID. We can also speak about issues of price volatilities, how we can address those issues as well, issues of reduction in labor supply that's needed in some of the factories. But coming quickly to what can really be done, I like the presentation by the director who highlighted a number of short-term measures and also medium to long-term interventions, and I'll also follow the same framework. First, to complement a number of countries who have put in place a number of national safety nets to actually address the vulnerable farmers, the vulnerable communities, in terms of maybe even in terms of seeds, support in terms of cash inputs and the like. But this hasn't been largely implemented within the region. It's also quite key as we note how we can also support and provide that safety net. There is a number of trade measures that have been implemented. The director mentioned trade facilitation initiatives at regional level to facilitate the movement of food as essential goods, and also the movement of the testing of the truck drivers as well. Further short-term measures can also look at how we can actually improve transport and logistics systems across the region, improve e-tracking services so that they can be speedier delivery in terms of perishable goods and services, perishable goods and agricultural products within the region, and also even strengthening supply chain initiatives and regional markets, sharing data and information in terms of production, surpluses that can also aid regional trade. And I think quite key, addressing trade restrictions that as a region, especially within this time, is quite important to shy away from introducing trade bans and trade restrictions. But I'll speak more to some of the medium to longer term interventions that we need to look at. First is, how do we increase local production, diversification, and value chain? I think that's quite key as a region, especially when you look at the trade statistics for agriculture and food, with food import bill being suggested to be, as a continent, to be at around 35 billion. And estimates are suggesting that by 2025, it will be as high as more than 100 billion. Almost treble the amount that we are currently importing right now. So it sends a number of messages in terms of how really do we address this deficit within the region, and how do we increase our local capacities in terms of production, diversification, and value addition to actually address that gap, particularly in light of the CFTA and the opportunities with the TFTA, which have been highlighted. The second issue is strengthening regional value chain approaches and also regional strategies. I think it's quite key, particularly with the disruptions that have shown us that we might not be able to rely on China or external partners, especially within this time, but how do we build the capacities within the region, where we know that Uganda has potential to become the breadbasket of the region. So how do we strengthen their capacity? How do we utilize the manufacturing capacities within Kenya to actually complement the production within Uganda? How do we look at various approaches that we can strengthen a more regional approach to solve the challenges within our regional agriculture, taking note of the various comparative advantages of the countries? Digital technologies and infrastructure is key, and it's quite cross-cutting from issues of production, upscale of technologies, to issues of infrastructure, market infrastructure. I'll finish in a minute, of market infrastructure as well, across the value chain, issues of data and market information. How do we improve connectivity amongst the countries, information on businesses, information on production, and how do we utilize such information to actually improve our connectivity and trade? Issues of capacity and to do with improving the size and the resilience of our business, but most important, the cross-cutting issues in terms of private sector engagement, private sector dialogue, private sector-led investment. Who are some of the key stakeholders who we can work with, and what are some of the types of solutions and interventions within the above areas that I've highlighted that we can build upon? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam, for giving us a very inciting short-term and long-term measures to make the agricultural sector competitive in the region, and not only in the region, but also where we can able to tap the bigger market of continental free trade area, as well as exporting the agricultural produce from EAC. Now I think it is time for discussion, and I will invite a few questions because of the interest of time. Anyone who wanted to ask question, please be very brief and direct your question to among our three panelists. Welcome. You can raise your hand and then actually ask the question.
Adrian, someone has raised their hand. Is the investor?
Vine, can you come for the question?
He's muted. He's muted, Adrian. Someone to unmute him or her.
Sylvester, can you assist him or her?
Please proceed, Vince.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to do the video, but it's actually not coming through. Is video permanently closed or what's happening?
We can hear you. Can you ask the question?
Okay, fine. So I'm calling from London. I'm grateful to my friend that invited me to the meeting and all the rest of it. So I've got a couple of questions. First and foremost, I'm grateful to be a part and parcel of what's going on here. The one big thing is that how much, I've got a number of questions, like one of them is how much kind of influence do we have in the East African economy in terms of this group, like what we can influence, that's number one. Number two, do we have enough influence with the banks, that are on the ground as we speak right now, i.e., do we have any MOUs, as they call them, that anybody that is associated with the East African Community Council can work with, and what are the benefits with that? Number three is basically the agriculture section that Kudzai, I think it was Kudzai earlier on, I think she was saying something about the benefits of being in the agricultural sector and all the rest of that. So some of us are very interested in that environment. And obviously, 65% of Kenyan economy, for example, or maybe the East African economy, actually driven by, the food and all the rest of it. How much, what we can do going forward in terms of even working with Uganda and Tanzania and the rest of them in the region to benefit, and whether there's some kind of an advisory service. Do we have an advisory service on the ground where we can actually deal with anybody else within the panel? You may not have all the answers right now, but then at the same time, question number 4 is just making sure that when we talk about partner states, I didn't understand what partner states actually meant. So I remember the chairman or the director or whoever was talking earlier on was saying something about the heads of states and the partner states meetings and all of that, all that. So who are the partner states? That's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. I think with the interest of time, we'll also request you to put your question in the chat room, because some of the questions with email, so we can respond some of the questions which are not directly related to this webinar. Anyone who also wants to raise another question before I go back to the panelists? I saw Madam Miriam Sebunya at one time wanted to ask a question.
Yes, you are right, but I put it in the chat. I just wanted to thank and congratulate EABC and EAC on the recovery plans, especially in consultation with the key stakeholders. The plan.
We can't hear you, madam.
Very good timelines. Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yeah, doctor, you are dropping. You are dropping, doctor.
I'm back now. I said the plans were very exciting, except that we did not get an idea as to how long it would take to start seeing the first results of recovery. What is the estimated period? Some sectors are saying they lost like 5 years. So how do we see ourselves recovering, at what rate and within how many years? That I thought would have come out to give us more hope. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. Now I think there is some question which was directed to Madam Kuzia on the agriculture by the first participant who asked the question, Mr. Vince. So I would like panelists to respond those questions. Also, I have another question for Director of Trade from EAC, especially in terms of the e-commerce. And the question is it the time for region to start investing in e-commerce as we move forward in the economic recovery, acknowledging the term in terms of infrastructure of the partner state are lacking the basis for infrastructure for connection. I understand under the economic recovery plan, there is a lot of intervention in the ICT. So Director, also you can respond that. Can we start with Madam Kuzia on the agriculture?
Thank you so much, Adrian. I believe a number of questions that Vince asked will need a direct follow-up with him. They were mainly in line of understanding the EAC partner states and what they do. So I would probably request, so that we don't take a lot of time, I would request Secretariat to consult him. Also, the other question was focusing on understanding the nature of advisory services within the agriculture sector. Yes, there are a number of business advisory services at country levels through BDS services, and also through, I know a number of banks are also offering business advisory services. Then also a number of associations and partner projects working with associations to actually deliver advisory services to the agriculture sector. But there are also gaps in terms of probably related to the uptake of technology-related advisory services to improve and have a greater outreach. So I think there is scope for growth on that as well. But maybe to fully understand the nature of your organization and how you would want to partner and work more within the East Africa community, I would probably suggest that Adrian can reach out to you post the meeting to see how those partnerships can be realized. Thank you.
Very much. Now I'm inviting.
Just to add to that, Adrian, I suggest that the participants who raised the question on the contact on the banking sector in the East Africa and on the partner states, you share our contact, you share EABC contact. We'll follow up with him and provide the right and appropriate contacts.
Okay, that is okay, Edie. That's why we have requested him also to put his email in our chat room. Then we will actually contact him for further clarification. Now I think we go back to Director of Trade to respond to some of the question, but also there is the question from.
Could I just say, sorry to interrupt there, could I just say that my email address is vokelo@aol.com, because okay, I might not get this link again. So if I miss it, then Kudzai or anybody else is trying to reach me, you might not get it. It's V for Vincent, O for Oscar, K for Kilo, E for Echo, yeah, L for Lima, O, which is Oscar again, at AOL.com. That's all. Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll respond to that as soon as I can, if that's okay.
That is very okay with us, Mr. Soso, or we can see your chat.
Mr. Okay, that's fine. That's
okay. Right. Okay, now we go back to Director of Trade to respond to those questions, and especially that question from Madam Sebunya on when do we expect the result start coming from the strategic plan. Director, karibu sana.
Thank you, moderator. I'll begin with the question on e-commerce. The question was coming from a skeptical perspective that how can we think of investing in e-commerce well aware of the infrastructure being unsupportive. I would like to begin by saying that the intervention under e-commerce is just catching up. But our traders and business community are already transacting e-commerce, under e-commerce. They have already embraced it. And the much business is already conducted under commerce. As a Kickstarter for this process of developing the e-commerce strategy for EAC, there was a scoping study in the entire region, in all the partner states, on the status of e-commerce ecosystem in all the partner states. What exists, how the business is transacting, what exists in terms of preparedness. That's what we established. Actually, if you are not trading under e-commerce these days, there is you may not break even. So, having done that, undertaken the study, the growth strategy was evolved. And after that, there are discussions on the strategy, putting the pillars, and then we're holding national workshops to sensitize private sector and other coordinators and other players on e-commerce strategy and seeking their views. So it is at the tail end. What may be lacking is in terms of legislation, especially legislation, regional protocol, or a regional kind of harmonized approach towards e-commerce. Training, there are some private sector players who are not aware of the different platforms available under e-commerce. There is a capacity building, there is a aligning of institutions, the institutional framework for overseeing e-commerce, and how probably the payment system can be supportive, or it can be enhanced to be supportive of e-commerce. But the whole e-commerce architecture is already functional and running, so there shouldn't be any worry. The infrastructure which we have is enough for kick-starting and running e-commerce effectively. Business to business is already being conducted under e-commerce. So a lot of exhibitions are being conducted under digital platforms. So there shouldn't be any worry. What is remaining is the entire public sector role in this whole e-commerce architecture. I think it's the only one which is lagging behind, and it will catch up. So there shouldn't be any worry. That is my response. There is enough infrastructure and it's already running. There is no need for worry. The second issue in relation to the strategic plan. Let me emphasize, if you listen to the components of the strategic plan, you will hear that, you will learn that these are not new things. Actually, what is being captured is just to isolate some satellite areas which we think can resuscitate our economies, especially in terms of trade and investment. But there is nothing new that is being said. Even if we talk about funding, there is already funding being channeled towards the MSMEs, special funds for investment and the trade promotion in all. But now the point being made is that the private sector needs some kind of big bang. We need to push in more money. So it's not a separate intervention that there is something new that is coming up. Just isolating a few strategic interventions. What I think may still be lacking is sort of to delineate and share roles. We say the private sector oversight institutions will coordinate this way. The primary private sector players, this is their role. The EAC secretariat will coordinate this way. The financial institutions will play this role. That kind of role sharing and the alignment. But if there is enough political will and the partner states are agreeing that post-COVID recovery is not a matter that can be pursued at personal. It's rather big because the impact on our companies, on trade, on agriculture was so tremendous that we need a combined effort and some kind of harmonized approach. Once all of us are convinced to go that way, instead of each one of us trying to grapple with it alone, then we should be able to make headways and realize our objectives. Already the efforts are there, but we need to do more at a regional level in a concerted effort with development partners, the private sector, the coordinators, and we share some roles here and there. Once that is done, it shouldn't take too long. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Director. I think we have a very limited time remaining, so I encourage people to write their question in our chat room with the email or contact, then we will respond those questions. Now I think it's end of the session 1. And now I invite my colleague, Mr. Lamek Wesonga, Manager, Policy and Standard at EABC Secretariat, to moderate the second session. Karibu Lamek. You are mute, Lamek. We can't hear you.
I suggest, Adrian, you continue. Lamek we can't hear Lamek.
Lamek, do you have a challenge?
It seems he has a challenge of connectivity. Can you please continue in the interest of time?
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Now, I think because of the challenge Lamek is facing, we go directly to Dr. Miriam Sebunya, who is going to give us a perspective of COVID-19 from transport sector. And directly, I'm going to ask you, Madam Sebunya, how has the transport and logistics sector in the EAC region been affected by COVID-19 pandemic? And has the response from the regulators and the policymaker been instrumental in mitigating the effect to business? If so, how? Welcome, Madam.
Thank you. Good afternoon, participants. My name is Marian Sebunya. I am a Chairman, National Logistics Platform of Private Sector Foundation, Uganda. I am a freight forwarder, customs agent, a leader in business, especially transport sector across the region. Thank you for inviting me to this forum, and thank you for that question. It's an interesting one, and I don't know whether it should be me to answer it or all the other sectors. And today I will take the opportunity to bring out the transport sector as a cross-cutting sector. Transport is a trade facilitation function, transport and logistics, and it provides services to all sectors of the economy. I heard agriculture talk about it. If you don't talk about it, if you don't have it right, then you don't arrive in the market competitive, so all your efforts may be in vain. So how we have been affected, or the sector has been affected, is a combination of how all the other sectors have been affected. What affects trade affects us because that's who we service, that's who we transport, that's who we handle. If it affects industry, that's manufacturing and others, then it affects us. When their volumes drop, then we are out of business. What affects tourism is the same. If they suffer, if the whole economy is not functioning, then transport and logistics also don't have any.
Madam, were you still in?
And to demonstrate this, one of my colleagues last week in Mombasa said that let's take a moment and reflect on a day in life without transport. And he added, please add the legs because they are part of transport. So in my submission today, I want us to reflect on how transport affects every other sector. And in the face of COVID, what hit everybody hit us. In the interest of time, I see our 2 hours are running out. I will not go into it, but what I would want you to understand is that, in my opinion, there is no sector, and I congratulate agriculture. There is no sector that should be talking about their competitiveness, their survival, their existence without talking about transport. And it contributes a very high percentage of production. In some countries, in what we call ourselves now land-linked countries, it goes up to 37% in countries like Burundi and DRC. So that I would want us today, what we take away from the transport and logistics sector is to bring awareness to all the sectors in the economy to their plight when transport is not functioning well. And it's transport is, and how all the sectors of the economy depend on it to be competitive. It's the easiest even to cut the cost of production from, but also it's the easiest to target for taxing and plus NTBs. So at the onset of COVID-19, at the border of Malaba, we had a strike from Kenyan drivers, and it went on for some time. It's the very first time I got a telephone call, a telephone conversation with the president of a republic that lasted 45 minutes, asking me what the problem is. And I can't even remember the number of questions he asked. So that's how important it is. He asked so many questions to understand what's going on, to understand what can be done, to understand why it's expensive, to understand why people don't invest in it so that it's competitive, to understand. And after 45 minutes, I was so humbled that there is someone of that level who can want to understand the driver and the transport and learn. And the last question he asked was, so how do we get transport? How do we get cargo off the roads and put it on rail? And I was like, but you don't have rail. So then it takes us back to how we were affected because we do not have multimodal transport. How are we going to get out of this? So as I conclude on that one, and if it's the only thing I say today, it's about all sectors realizing how the transport and logistics affect their businesses. And if every sector does that and every sector advocates for affordable transport and right transport and logistics policies, we shall all be competitive in the market. So has the response from the regulators and policymakers been instrumental in mitigating the effects to businesses? I would say yes and no. The responses are or have been more or less responding to the symptoms. How do we now get moving today? How do we move tomorrow, next week or something? So we are looking at symptoms. Why is there a traffic buildup in Malaba? Why is there a problem in Mutukula? And thanks to the past ED at EABC, I would see him jumping in Mutukula, jumping in Malaba, jumping in Busia. And so our response, even us as private sector, we tend to look at today. We tend to look at the symptoms, not to look at the cause, the root cause, and uproot it completely. So I would say yes and no. The response have more or less been towards symptoms, the effects of COVID, which was good temporary response, but towards the recovery of economies, we need to be more deliberate, especially to a cross-cutting sector that will impact all sectors in all economies. Today, like I said, transport contributes not less than 30% to the cost of production for any product, and even produce.
Okay.
And this 30%, 40, 37% includes non-tariff barriers along the roads and the highways. The longer the road, the more it increases the cost of production. So when we talk transport, we talk entire economy, and we need to look at it as impacting entire economies and ultimately the cost of living as well. It's not just the cost of doing business, but the cost of living as well. And apart from high investment, you know, our sector, transport and logistics, has investment in it is very high. So apart from high investment in the transport and logistics businesses, there is a high cost of finance in some countries. You add NTBs, then you add the taxes, then you add regulation-related costs. Transport and logistics, if you want to know, is the easiest tax target. They slam levies. We talk about cross-border fees. Each country puts what they want. And to me, that can be reviewed with a view of reducing the cost of doing business and the cost of living for increased production, but also increased purchase power. I leave that to the economists because it's longer than that. It's more detailed. And you asked that if the powers that be have attended to it, how have they done it? After saying the negative things, there have also been COVID response brought out some attention from the regulators as well, and they changed their priorities in some economies of the region. Like in Uganda, we see there was a major priority shift, like from focusing on standard gauge railway and investing more in the meter gauge railway that is already existing, and the rehabilitation of the vessels on Lake Victoria. And the Tanzania government has generally focused on multimodal. Their vessels on the lake are up and running. Their meter gauge has been rehabilitated, and the central corridor is up and running more or less. And like we said, then we get multimodal transport, the lake, the rail, and the roads. if we know that competition brings costs down, so this is a good thing that our government have done. And we know that even if it's not competition, it's complementary. So we think they have responded in that respect to work on infrastructure that brings multimodal transport into play. I thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam, for highlighting the importance of the transport sector in bringing competitiveness, not only in that particular sector, but the whole sector and the whole economy of EAC, and also the lesson which has been learned in terms of addressing the symptoms instead of addressing the root cause of the challenge brought by COVID. Now, we understand that Africa Continental Free Trade Area commenced on 1st January this year, and the transport and logistics sector is expected to be among the major beneficiary of the Continental Free Trade Area. In your view, is the sector in EAC region ready? And what strategy have the logistic platform put in place to create readiness to the industry players in order to partake in this wide market as the sector recover steadily? Madam, very brief.
Very briefly, the sector in the region is as ready as far as it depends upon us. For the sector in transport, first of all, we used to be very fragmented and very confusing with our policy advocacy because we were fragmented. We used to confuse our regulators with different opinions, but to date, we have in East Africa tried to come together through bodies like the National Logistics Platform you hear, is all the transport players in all the sectors in the transport and logistics chain put together, plus the public sector for public-private dialogue. So we have organized ourselves to stop fragmentation. We have focused on public-private dialogue, which also was brought by COVID, and we should not drop it. I saw it enhanced during COVID onset, and I'm glad East African Business Council is carrying it forward, but please pass it on to your members in partner states so that we speak with one voice in order to be heard. So we have organized ourselves. We have FIAFA, which brings together all the associations in freight forwarding in the EAC region together. We have at the continental level also started discussing a constitution, which we have concluded for Federation of African Freight Forwarders Associations, in short FAF, and we finished the constitution. We have, you won't believe it, created a WhatsApp group across Africa for logistics players, transport and logistics, and I have seen a lot of transactions going on that platform. I have cargo in Zimbabwe, I'm trying to move it to Zambia, who has containers, who has a truck, please give me a quote. We are discussing things that concern us. And FAF is targeting registration in Ethiopia to be partners with AU, or in Egypt, where our interim chair is, and we shall soon be up and running. That's on the front of speaking with one voice and collaboration and partnerships we have built. However, the most important thing in EAC we have done as the platform is create training. We have doctor curriculum, we do training, we do certification, and we do registration. We are heading to self-regulation by Act of Parliament that we have requested EABC to do at regional level to make it happen faster rather than each country going on its own. So briefly, the private sector is as ready, the logistics platforms are as ready as far as it depends upon us. What depends to our governments, what is missing or lacking, in my opinion, what doesn't depend upon us is the question we ask ourselves is, we are not able to trade with each other. Right now, we still talk about non-tariff barriers. We are still talking about trade barriers within our region. Our own intra-EAC trade is still low. So we are waiting to hear from the East African Economic Bloc, the EAC, how we shall move before we solve our own problems, how we shall move to the next problems. For example, NTBs, even if I wanted to take milk to Zambia and I had to pass through Tanzania and pay $500 if my truck is from Uganda, $500 is a lot of money for cross-border. So if I'm going to Zambia to take my milk, will it arrive there at a competitive rate, or it will not? So we are hopeful, or we are recommending through EABC that these matters are looked into by, first of all, harmonizing, removing all the trade barriers, if possible, removing the non-tariff barriers, and harmonizing things like cross-border fees and that anything that will make us, they are soft targets before we talk about infrastructure. They are low-hanging fruits that can make us competitive out of EAC if we want to go continental free trade, is those things, the soft ones, the policies, the harmonization of cross-border fees, the removal of non-tariff barriers, so that we move as fast as possible and arrive to another country outside the bloc still competitive. Otherwise, we are not getting anywhere. So I thank you. I think that's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam, for telling us and assuring us the transport and logistics is very ready to tap the continental free, trade-free area. Only the challenge is for the partner state as a bloc to address the challenges which are outside your area, like non-tariff barriers and trade barriers. Now we quickly invite Mr. Ngez, Regional Coordinator, East Africa Tourism Platform, to give us the perspective of COVID-19 from the tourism and the hospitality industry, because we know for sure this is one of the sector which was hard hit by COVID-19. So I will start with the question, and when he comes in, he will introduce himself and then respond the first question, which is, tourism is one of the sectors hard hit by COVID-19. What regional policy option should be adopted by EAC partner state to protect and sustain the sector players amid COVID-19 and the future pandemics? Welcome, Mr. Ngez.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I hope you can all hear me.
Yes, okay. We can hear and see you clearly with the background of Kilimanjaro.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the EABC for the invitation. My name is Yves Ngenzi, and I'm the coordinator for the East Africa Tourism Platform, which is a regional apex body that brings together the different players in the tourism sector, basically to address some of the issues on trade and encourage private sector participation in the integration process or in the EAC. So going straight to your question, indeed, tourism has been one of the hardest hit sectors by this pandemic. Looking at when we had the restrictions, and still now we still have restrictions, but the world as well came to a standstill. Travels were not possible at some point. So looking at the regional policies, indeed, I'd like first to appreciate that there is a lot of work that has been done at the national government level, but also at the EAC level in terms of addressing the challenges that came with the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, I'd like to highlight some of the policies that have been adopted at the EAC level, like the recently adopted the EAC Tourism Recovery Plan, which is critical to bringing back tourism business in the region, as well as the EAC marketing plan that was also in the pipeline for some time. That also has been adopted, and we hope that with the right financing and the implementation of these strategies, we'll be able to bring back business very soon to the levels of before COVID. So talking about the policies that could be put in place, of course, there are several. I'm going to try to summarize some of the key ones that we think should be put at the EAC level. One, as we look at even currently, we still have a lot of issues and challenges in terms of the COVID-19 protocols and the guidelines that are in place. So there's still an hindrance into ease of travel. So when you look at, for example, the testing, there's still a gap in terms of harmonizing the fees. It's still expensive, the testing for a regional traveler. Here we're looking at some countries charging $100 for a PCR test, others 80, others 50. So we still have gaps in terms of harmonizing the COVID-19 protocols, but also availability. I can mention one of the countries I was traveling to in the EAC, and I had to have almost a half day to get tested because of the difficulties that are there in terms of readiness to get this testing eased for travelers. So that is, and as well, we're talking about, if you look at the COVID-19, the protocols, there are still a lot of requirements in terms of testing, testing on arrival. We saw even currently Uganda and Burundi also introducing testing upon arrival, even at land borders, which is also creating issues in terms of bringing on board quarantine and so on. So those are some of the challenges that we need, that we see that there is a need to put in place guidelines and the framework for regional, but also at continental level for recognition of COVID-19 tests. That is one, but also as we having these vaccinations, we need also to put the mechanisms in place to have recognition of COVID-19 certificates as well. So harmonization is very key in terms of travel protocol. We still see countries having different protocols. If you're going to Nairobi, you'll be going to Kenya, you'll be required to be tested the 96 hours before travel. If you're going to Rwanda or Uganda, 72. So we still see also gaps in that area for regional travel, as we are looking at the EAC as a single tourism destination. Of course, there is a lot of potential to automate those data to ensure that we eliminate those entities. Another area that I think has been looked at because of COVID Here we're talking about domestic and regional tourism. Before COVID-19, there was little emphasis on domestic and regional tourism, but we have seen that with this pandemic, it is crucial to look even inwardly and focus on inward travel. So we've seen campaigns like Tulambule Uganda, Tembea Rwanda, Tembea Kenya. And in that context, even ourselves as the East Africa Tourism Platform, we initiated a campaign called Tembea Nyumbani, really encouraging East Africans to visit East Africa before we think of other destinations. We have seen a lot of interest. It's been 15 days since we started this campaign, but we've seen a lot of interest. And during these 15 days, we've seen almost 400 requests for information for travel within the EAC. So there's a lot of potential. We see now even Kenyans considering other destinations than Mombasa for the applications. So it's a good trend, and it's an area where we believe that we should put more emphasis in terms of promotion of domestic and regional tourism, as well as we need also to look at product diversification, and innovation. So when you see product diversification now, we used to be known as a block, wildlife and beach, and this is not if you have to be competitive in the global market. So tourism product diversification is very key. We've seen some of the partner states introducing sport tourism, areas like golf tourism. Recently, Tanzania launched their golf tourism, and business tourism as well. MICE is also booming in some of the partner states. So product diversification is very key. We've seen other destinations like in Southern Africa, where they've managed to have a lot of investments, which also brought these products to be more than just wildlife and national parks. So we've seen countries also like Kenya bringing on board tourism planning and development at county levels. This is very important to be able to have to create entrepreneurial and investment opportunities. And we've seen counties in Kenya starting their marketing, which is very important, diversification, as well as domestic and regional tourism. Other areas, of course, I know EABC has been also working very much on this area. It's an area of ensuring that there is implementation of open skies policy and the liberalization of airspace. So here we mean, of course, there has been the Yamoussoukro Declaration, the AU single air transport, but we need to accelerate the implementation and ensure that this is a reality and it's done. Currently, of course, it's still very difficult to travel on the continent, and it's even expensive to travel in the region, the EAC alone. I was actually shocked. One of my colleagues that was recently traveling, 1 hour flight from Arusha to Kigali, she had to pay $600, which is I don't know, which is very expensive at any standard. So as well as we really need to see that all partner states really are signing to this SATAM, the single air transport market on the continent. I think as of now, Kenya and Rwanda are the ones that have signed to this protocol. And surely that there is still a lot of taxes and a lot of costs that are hindering travel within the region, but also on the continent. So to summarize, yes, we need that. We need to facilitate more mobility in the region, but also in the continent, and ease some of the aspects like visa regimes and so on. And we know that in the EAC you have the single tourist visa, So to have all partner states also adhere to this single tourism visa, I think is very important at this particular point.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gez, for giving us the policy option, but I think also you have responded in another question in terms of the lesson, where you have given even the resolution on how to address those challenges we are facing. But now another question is, what impactful monetary and physical incentive have EAC partner state provided for tourism and the hospitality industry? And which area can government do better for the sector?
Thank you, Adrian. Indeed, we've seen that there's a lot that government have done in the partner states. We've seen high-level support, really for tourism sector in all the partner states during this crisis for the tourism sector. Indeed, we saw also stimulus packages being put in place in some of the partner states, Kenya, Rwanda, and in some countries we saw even like Kenya about 3 billion. In Rwanda, the whole of recovery fund, 50% of the fund went into tourism, showing really the importance that the governments will give into tourism. Some of the other, I'll mention some of the other incentives that we saw. Of course, vaccinations, tourism has been prioritized, and we've seen vaccination being kicked into all the partner states, which is very important as we try to take back tourism, rebuild the tourism. We've seen as well some of the tax incentives that were provided by government, including pay as you earn to a certain threshold of employees, people employed in the tourism sector, some waiver on VAT to some certain categories of tourism establishments. And recently we also seen tourist vehicles being waived some of the taxes. So these are very, very important. Of course, government were facilitating in terms of loan restructuring, which was very important. Loan restructuring and ensuring that banks are providing some grace periods to some businesses who were heavily impacted. So in terms of what can be done by government more, on top of that, of course, we continue to advocate for prioritizing vaccination in the tourism and hospitality sector. The more people we have vaccinated, I think the better confidence we are giving to the international market, and the lifting of some of the restrictions we still have, because many of our countries in the EAC are still on red lists in terms of international travel to the country. So it is a serious hindrance, as well as what government can do more. Number two is ensuring that we remove some of these NTBs. COVID-19 came with a lot of non-tariff barriers to the tourism sector. We still have a lot of curfews, a lot of testing for clients, even for the staff themselves. So there is still a lot of NTBs that we think government can work on and help us in terms of reduction of these barriers. And thirdly, there is still a lot of issues in terms of payment of loans. So due to this pandemic and where the revenues were low, several businesses, including medium and even large companies, had loans. So they are still struggling to pay these loans. So a stimulus package would really help refinance these hotels. We've seen even some of the hotels being, of course, solved because they were not able to repay their loans. So a government bailout really is really important, and as well as ensuring that we have some incentives. The other one is to ensure that we control the cost of inputs and like fuel, which are coming up and which ultimately affect all the costs of doing business in tourism. So those are some of the areas that I think that government should look at, as well as very importantly ensuring that we harmonize these protocols for travel and guidelines.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Angezi, for giving us the area you think the government can do better in order to make our tourism and hospitality industry recover from this impact of COVID-19. So I encourage participants, if you have any questions, please write it in our chat room, then we'll respond those questions. Now I'm inviting Madam Mary Ngeshu, our board member, who is going to give perspective of COVID-19 from the small and medium enterprises. And I will directly start with a question: to what extent have the EAC partner state incentives addressed the recovery of SMEs in the region from COVID-19? Madam, welcome.
Thank you, Adrian, and thank you for all the participants for being part of this EABC. My name is Mary Ngeshu. I'm the Managing Director for Line Plus Group. I also sit in as the Chair for SME at the Kenya Private Sector Alliance. I'm also a board member at the East Africa Business Council, and I also sit in as the Chair for SME across the region. So as you have rightfully asked, all the member states have put initiatives to put measures to help the SMEs during COVID-19 in order to ease liquidity constraints. Many EAC partners have introduced measures towards deferral of taxes, debt payment, review of interest rates, and specific center cushioning funds. Specifically, I would maybe give an example of a few. If you look, the Kenya government provided 100% tax relief for low-income earners who are earning less than a maximum of 24,000 Kenya shilling, which that meant that they had an additional of 1,700 per person per month due to that relief. Also in Kenya, temporary suspension for listing the in the Credit Reference Bureau for personal defaulting for loan obligation was also put in so that if there is any delay for any SMEs to do payment, then their credibility is not spoiled. Also in Uganda, on the 26th May 2020, the Uganda Support to Agricultural Revitalization and Transformation Facility Management, they approved a Uganda Kenya shilling 830 million to support small businesses fund to support the SMEs. And through this facility, Uganda small businesses would access working capital with zero interest, with a flexible repayment period of up to about 12 months. Under the recovery fund, and this recovery fund was interest-free, and they were also able to get to a maximum of 40 million Uganda shillings, which is approximately 10,000 euro, based on individual business cash flow challenges. Again, in Rwanda, on the 4th April, the Rwanda began working on a $200 million US fund to support access in capital for small and medium enterprises to facilitate recovery during the pandemic. The Rwanda Revenue Authority also extended payment of income tax for a period of 1 year from the end of March 2019 to end of April 2021. These are some of the mandatory measures that were put in. Also, several central governments were able to extend to make it easy for banks in terms of the monetary regulatory, so that the banks were able to extend more loans for the SMEs. Several countries also introduced, extended, or simplified the provision of loan guarantees to enable commercial banks to extend lending to the SMEs with ease in access to capital. This ensured SME stay afloat and continue their operation. I give an example of one. The National Bank of Rwanda instructed the commercial banks to ease loan repayment conditions to borrowers and introduce an extended loan facility to the banks with an equivalent of Rwanda franc 50 billion for SME to access credit during the COVID time. Several other countries provided grants and subsidies for SMEs and other companies to bridge the drop of revenue. An example again, I would give an example of Rwanda that introduced a grant termed as the Economic Recovery Fund that was worth Rwanda franc 100 billion to establish towards hotel sector loan, refinancing the sector that had lost business up to almost 90% of their revenue due to cancellation of events and booking due to the global lockdown and travel restrictions. Different countries also increased different other measures that were used to use non-banking financial support, which included intermediaries in their policy support mix. This came in form of financial advisory to ensure the stability of operation. Also, banks in different member states, they also offered a lot of business advisory. And I also remember the area speaker who spoke from KPMG also talked about business continuity plan. A lot of that was done, and most organizations, they did that for free, especially for the SMEs, so that they can be able to have continuity. Increasingly in countries are putting in structural policies to help SMEs adopt the new working methods, especially in digital technology, and find new markets and sales channel to continue operations under this pandemic season. Also, policies aiming to address urgent short-term challenges, such as the introduction of teleworking, but also contribute to the strengthening of resilience of the SME in more structural way and support their further growth. The government of Rwanda leveraged on the country already high financial inclusion, which is at 93%, and took measures to limit the spread of COVID-19 by waiving peer-to-peer mobile money transfer fee, merchant payment fees, and they were also able to waive transfer of money from accounts to the mobile wallets, so that then the SMEs were able to do the transaction of their business without necessarily having a lot of physical transaction. I think these are some of the measures that I would say that different member states were able to put in place to measure. I've not talked about Tanzania. That doesn't mean that Tanzania did also not put measures. I think I've just given a few examples in the interest of time. That actually the member states, they put initiative to support the SME across the region, as we are aware that SME contributes to almost 90% job creations across the region, and we are also contributing up to almost about 82% of the trade that happens across the region.
Madam, for that clarification in terms of the incentives which have been put in place by the partner state in addressing the challenge from the COVID-19 for SME, Now, given SME being the major source of jobs creation in the region, which intervention do you think EAC partner states should adopt in order to continue stimulating the growth of SME in the region?
Now, East Africa economies can collectively strengthen the SME to allow sustainability in the businesses by simply just looking at the low-hanging fruits that can be able to help strengthen the SME businesses. Some of them would include innovation through digitalization and automation to supply for the regional supply chain through use of digital solution. We have seen through the pandemic, especially with the lockdown, we were not able to move around, but digital solution came in as a measure that really helped. So focusing on improving or through innovations around that are accessible to SME, I think that would be one way that can be able to help that. And then also prioritizing on support of SME for continuation of entrepreneurship, nurturing, and establishing of COVID-19 business survival kit for promoting the SME comprehensiveness. SME, they suffer from a unique challenge in terms of lack of information, lack of skills, lack of access to finances. And the director for trade really talked about the area, how the EAC is working on capacity building for the SME, so that across the region, member states, we are able to also help create sustainability and scale up of the SME. Promoting local manufacturing across East Africa, and protection of local manufacturing. We saw, especially like through the PPE during the pandemic, the member states were able to come in and protect the local manufacturing, especially on the SME. And I think these are some of the measures that we can put across the EAC to support that. That when we see and we realize that a particular product is being produced locally and we have enough capacity for that, we protect such businesses. EAC partner states should also promote and increase uptake of local manufactured product. We should promote Buy East Africa, Build East Africa. We need to come up with a policy. There's a policy of Buy East Africa, Build East Africa. We need to build awareness to our members that we source more locally. This will help in mitigating some of the trade gaps that we heard about. Even the lady who talked about the transport and logistics said that we had constraint of goods moving around because of transportation. We could not import our raw material. So if we are then able to produce our raw material locally, we could be able to take care of that supply chain disruptions that were brought on board. Each East Africa partner state to emphasize provision of support to support sustainability of East Africa regional value chain integration. We look at the strength of Kenya, we look at the strength of Uganda, and we look in how can we be able to help that and create an integrated value chain. There was also one lady from the agriculture who said, how is it that we can have Kenya being supported by the produces that are coming from Uganda? If we are able to focus and maybe promote a lot of integrated value chain across the region, I think those are some of the areas that we can be able to help, and especially the SMEs, because the SME plugs in a lot in the value chain ecosystem, even for the big manufacturers or for the big producers.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam. Now you have talked of the digital solution, and in response to COVID-19, we have seen many operations have gone digital. Which intervention should EAC partner state adopt in order to relieve capacity bottleneck and ensure quality connectivity in the region to support services that have adopted digital technology?
Thank you, Adrian. The East Africa Community region continues to experience what can be called or considered as the early stage of e-commerce and the digital economy. it is slow due to different challenges across the region. So adaptation of e-commerce in the regional manifest disparities, with some countries having made notable progress. And I give an example of Kenya and Rwanda. They are quite ahead. I've seen a lot of progress also being done by Uganda and Tanzania. But when you look at South Sudan, Burundi, they are lagging quite a bit, but they are also putting a lot of effort currently so that we're able to mitigate those gaps. In digital transaction, in digital communication, telecommunication is important. The digital infrastructure is critical. So if member states can be able to exhibit to how we can be able to get the digital infrastructure, not only in the urban centers, but also in the rural area, then we can be able to harmonize that, to improve the digitalization and take advantage of the e-commerce platform. At the EAC economy, I think it is important that we are able to harmonize and implement the e-commerce policies, the legislatives and regulation at both national and a regional level. It is important to formulate, enact and enforce online security laws. It is also important to establish consumer protection, competition rules and security for the e-commerce. Establish and harmonize regulatory regimes for payment systems across the EAC, because as we trade digitally, we need to come up with a solution, also a digital solution on how it is that we can be able to make payments for the trades that we are doing. It is also important to harmonize and strengthen the e-commerce and trade-related standards. The director talked about this when he was talking about the e-commerce. I think those are areas that are priorities that we can be able to do that. To promote and support the digitalization of trade processes, businesses, and logistical processes. It is important to implement innovative online marketplaces so that we can be able to showcase, as SMEs, showcase our products and also create awareness and of the products that we are able to manufacture across the EAC. So we need to address the high cost of content development, which prevent small-scale traders from participating in online marketplaces due to limited knowledge and skill. We also need to capacity build them on this area so that they have capacity to participate on online marketplaces. We need to conduct a sensitization on public awareness, develop a framework for promoting digital skills through the education system, through the business sectors, through the private agencies, and mandate policy enhancement responsibility. I think some of those are some of the areas that I would, from the top of the mind, look into, that if we are able to do that, then we can be able to enhance digitalization and use of e-commerce across the region.
Thank you very much, Madam, for that suggestion on the intervention the partner states are required to do in order to encourage the uptake of the digital solution and the e-commerce and the other means like e-government, telemedicine, and other. So now I think we move to another panelist, and this is Mr. Mohamed Muzamil, Manager Policy Uganda Manufacturer Association, who is going to give us perspective of COVID-19 from manufacturing sector. And the question to our panelists is, given the fact that the manufacturing sector is one of the mainstay sector contributing to intra-EAC trade and investment, what are the best intervention measures for the sector? Muzamil, karibu.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And I wish to appreciate EABC for this arrangement, where we share views on how to help our region grow faster and better. Now, I have listened into quite a number of very interesting submissions from a wide range of discussants. And one of the things that has come out clearly is the need for us to speak with one voice. And to me, what was running in my head was the nature in which each of the sectors connects directly with another. You look at tourism connecting directly with transport, transport connecting directly with manufacturing, manufacturing connecting, that kind of intertwined nature of business that takes place within the private sector. Now, I must say that the COVID pandemic has came with a lot of challenges that have been exhibited over time. But at the same time, it has really shown that there's so much potential that lies within the region, that if harnessed can actually go a long way in ensuring that the region grows. And if we can have harmony in our operations, then we are destined for great achievements. Now, I was perusing through the draft of the East African Trade and Investment report, and there are quite a number of insights in there, and the figures speak volumes. The figures, especially relating to the intra-regional trade. And as you have correctly stated, Adrian, the main participant in this is the manufacturing sector, okay? And our goods, the goods that we produce, and the nature in which they move within the region is really something that we need to take very keen interest in, because it is then that we can be able to produce or to come up with a region that is self-sustaining. Now, I've seen that intra-regional trade has gone down, and this is mainly because of the numerous challenges that have come with the ability to move within the region in terms of both human and goods. We have a lot of challenges in logistical movements. I can't elaborate more than what the chairman of the logistics platform has mentioned. We've seen a lot of challenges that have come with the fact that we are unable to get raw materials on time and all that, which have grossly affected the state of play in the manufacturing sector. But also, this, like I said, has created a lot of opportunities for us to be able to discover some of the potential that really exists within the community. And as the figures speak also, we've seen our imports go down. And we've also seen in some instances, some goods, the exchange of goods within particular goods within the region has also increased. And yeah, so this has been a very good thing in a way. And we only call upon government now to listen more than ever to ensure that the COVID pandemic does not leave us in a worse state than we were before. And for us on our side as manufacturers, we propose that quite a number of incentives can be put forth to ensure that we have harmony in trade within the region. One of them is ensuring that we expedite the harmonization of standards. For instance, mutual recognition is very key in this particular area. We have seen mutual recognition expedited in some instances where now governments are able to recognize the COVID certificates, for instance. So we trust each other when it comes to testing COVID, that a certificate from Kenya can be recognized in Uganda, and one from Uganda can be recognized in Tanzania. So that is a good thing. And I think it needs to be replicated in all other aspects, especially in terms of the movement of goods and services, because not much is a difference between the health sector and what we actually consume as people. So I think this is one of the things that we need to see addressed as soon as possible. And also, we also need to see realignment of the macroeconomic policies to speak to the times, because right now everybody will agree that there are challenges that have come with the macroeconomic situation that we live in. We've seen government come up with tax measures. We appreciate the fact that government is really constrained financially. The report actually speaks about the increasing burden and the expanding expenditure budget, as well as the borrowing or the huge gaps that are now being created in terms of borrowing both locally and externally. So every government has now got a very huge burden in terms of borrowed funds. So basically, we are saying that manufacturing can play a very great role in ensuring that government can get the necessary resources, but it has to be coupled with, incentives that then should push or should encourage business to boost. So amidst the numerous lockdowns, okay, and the numerous challenges that have come with COVID, we suppose that government should sit down with the manufacturing entities, discuss, and see alternatives to resource or revenue mobilization, as opposed to the tax measures that have been established within the community. We've seen new tax measures being introduced, which basically focus on government collecting more, as opposed to facilitating businesses to grow. So that is one area. And then the other one is, of course, facilitating. Yes, Andrew. Are you saying something?
No, okay. Can you brief, because you want to, the time also is running.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Just to go through just quickly. The other one is, of course, ensuring that we have facilitation in terms of access to financing, especially patient capital for long-term manufacturing planning, or that rhymes with long-term manufacturing, planning processes. We also need to see a lot of movement in terms of, I've talked about harmonization of standards, but also ensuring that we streamline the transport sector. Madam Miriam, in her submission, talked mostly about ensuring that we have the corridors open, but we want to extend this discussion further to include the development of an integrated East African rail system, the development of an integrated EAC waterways system, because we are connected by numerous waterways. Take an example of the vast Lake Victoria, that has numerous, a lot of potential in, streamlining our transport. So we need to see that also streamlined in terms of that. Then, of course, we need a lot of incentives that speak to the times, as already stated. And lastly, amongst the interventions that we feel should be done is, I'm getting interruptions. Yes, okay. We need an EAC common position in terms of establishing a COVID-19 pandemic manufacturing transitional recovery policy or legislative compact. And this should speak to any future pandemic that may have disruptions that relate to what the COVID has caused. So yeah, to that question, I think that is the submission I can give.
Okay, thank you very much, Muzami, for giving us a detail of intervention which are required. And I think now, because we have given those areas of intervention, and now we wanted to know which area you think require more improvement and may require continuous public-private dialogues in terms of the intervention the partner states are taking?
Yes. Now, one of the areas that we need a lot of dialogue in is the supply chain. Madam Miriam, again, sorry if I bring up presentation. She talked about the challenges that have happened, especially in regarding the transition of goods, the movement of goods, and we've seen a lot of challenges in there, which requires government with private sector to sit and dialogue and ensure that we come up with a lasting solution. We should be looking at 50 years from now as opposed to tomorrow or today. So these are things that we know can happen. So we need to look beyond the current state of affairs and ensure that we have, continuous dialogue to ensure that we can be able to facilitate the movement of goods and services, especially in terms of improved logistics. But also, Adrian, the other thing that we feel needs to be done is the issue around local content or public government procurement of what is locally produced. Madam Mary talked about this. And we can't agree more. This is an area where we need constant government involvement. We need government to buy. We need to ensure that we build East Africa through consuming East African products. We've come of age, and we believe that the standards that we have are good enough to help us produce the quality that we need in products. So the issue of quality does not arise anymore. And if it's talking about the cost, if we are being expensive, then it's upon the government to ensure that they give incentives that then will bring the cost down. China and elsewhere where we import some of the commodities and goods that we consume that we say are cheap has gone a long way in incentivizing exports. What have we done? So we believe that these are things that we can sit on a round table, negotiate with government, and ensure that we have our factories and producers facilitated. So yeah, those are, I think, two areas that we believe if our government pays attention, can be able to turn around the state of affairs in manufacturing.
Okay, thank you very much, Muzamio, for giving us those areas which you think the government can do better, and in terms of ensuring that our manufacturing do better during this COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I think it is time for discussion, and with the interest of time, I think I will invite two questions. And for those who have questions, please put in our room chat, then we'll respond accordingly. Raise your hand and ask question, please. Welcome. I think I don't see any hand, and I think I now invite our executive director to officially close our meeting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Adrian. I want again to convey my appreciation, deep appreciation to all the panelists for the excellent presentation and discussion on this important topic of trade and investment recovery post-COVID. This has been a very enriching discussion, very deep insight, and really the panelists have done justice to the topic. So as I make my concluding remarks, there are a number of takeaways which we need to reflect on as we move forward. And from EABC, one that the region is not competitive as we want. And there are a number of barriers that have been addressed or discussed. One, trade barriers are still many. Non-tariff barriers are emerging. We need to ensure that those non-tariff barriers addressed. The issue of coordination and collaboration is very critical. The role of private sector should be clear and critical in all these interventions. We should be active players in the integration agenda. We need to take a leading role, as the treaty is very clear. So we shouldn't be a passive participant. There is a need to expedite, again, economic recovery strategy. We need to give a time frame. That's a takeaway that EABC needs to do with the EAC Secretariat in terms of giving timeline of all the components that Rashid has articulated very well. So we need to expedite economic recovery, especially the key components that we discussed, the 4 components. The CFTA opens up opportunities for the region, but we need to be prepared. Prepared in terms of digital tools and e-commerce investment, as well as regulation. I also took a note of regional value chain, promotion and diversification of the regional value chain, very critical. We need to promote regional content, local content, policy and strategy. From a business continuity aspect, operational resilience is very critical for business continuity program. We need to support our businesses to build back better, recover fast. So instruments and the incentives as highlighted by KPMG are very critical as we move forward in terms of recovery. By East Africa, build East Africa. It should be now in our DN in terms of how do we promote our regional value chain, our regional products. That's also echoes or speaks to the government procurement policies and strategies to support the SMEs. Transport and logistics is at the center, is our heart to drive all the sectors. We need to support it, reduce all the barriers related to transport and logistics. Deepen incentives, tax and financial incentives is very critical. We appreciated efforts made by our governments. Cases were given by Madam Mary in Uganda, in Kenya, in Rwanda, in Tanzania, where the tax and financial incentives have supported the businesses to continue. So those instruments are critical and are still required. I also noted the focus. Our focus should be, again, from Kuzaya, the focus should be on our comparative and competitive advantage. What are those sectors? What are those agriculture-related value chain issues of warehouse receipt system, storage facilities, NTBs along the agriculture? How do we address those NTBs so that our agriculture remains competitive, given its prominent role in the job creation, livelihood, and income, especially for smallholder farmers? Expedite efforts, as Eve mentioned, on measures and testing costs for COVID. We see that there are a lot of divergences in terms of costs related to COVID. If we are to spur and recover the tourism sector, we need to have common measures, harmonized measures in terms of the cost, and deter other costs that are emerging as he represented. Incentives for manufacturing, especially our standards, mutual recognition, build trust and confidence among our consumers. So our products should demonstrate high quality and ensure that they meet the requirements, taste and preference for our consumers. Alignment of macroeconomic policies and strategies is very critical. It is a panacea, a precondition for building back our economies. So both fiscal, monetary policy, trade policy need to respond to the current challenges, need to respond to the realities on the ground. Facilitating business to grow, that is a precondition. We need to support especially SMEs to grow. I think everyone mentioned the issue of integrated East Africa waterways. What we, Dr. Marian mentioned, we need to diversify our transport and logistics sector by supporting the government in terms of other avenues, other transport-related avenues like rail, waterways. These are what she called multimodal transport means. So common approach to recovery should be the guiding principles. So as I conclude here, I want to thank that those are key takeaways, and my team will craft that, will share it to everyone. But again, I want to thank all the participants, all the panelists, my team that has put together all these components, and these have been ably discussed, especially from a policy angle and from an operational angle. So I want to wish you a very good evening, and thank you, and we look forward to engage further as we develop these components as you ably articulated. Asantini, asante sana. Over to you, Adrian.
You're on mute.
Adrian, unmute.
I thank you all for participating, and I think the meeting is closed after the remarks from EAD.